Hi, film addicts. Welcome to the show. Today we have a very special and amazing guest. We have director Barry Cook, who made his feature directing debut on animated Disney film Mulan and so many other films that he did special effects for, including Beauty and the Beast, Little Mermaid, Aladdin, and even Captain EO. Let's welcome Barry Cook to the show. Hi, Barry.
Hi, Merlin. How are you?
I'm so excited to have you on the show. All the way from, I believe you're in Florida, right?
Yeah, I'm in Florida right now. Yeah.
Oh, great. Yeah. How did your weather with the recent, that terrible hurricane
A
over there?
hurricane.
Yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't too bad here in Central Florida. Our friends down in Sarasota area was rougher down there. And of course, Fort Myers was completely devastated by the storm there at the Gulf Coast. But right here in the center of the state near Orlando, we usually things slow down before they get right to us, no matter which direction is coming from the Atlantic or the Gulf. So we were very fortunate.
Ah, I have family like outside, like along the Space Coast, like Melbourne Beach. So
Yeah.
yeah, normally the East Coast of Florida gets it. So it's so I'm just just putting good thoughts and prayers out for everyone, and I'm glad that you're safe and we have you on the show. This is so exciting. So I wanted to ask Barry, so where did you grow up?
I was born in Nashville, Tennessee, and lived there until I was out of high school. And after that, I hit the road for Hollywood.
So when you're a little kid in Nashville, was there a favorite movie theater or a favorite movie that you had growing up and that you would go watch?
You know, the thing back then, really, when we were kids, were movies that were only aired on broadcast television one time every year, right? There was no streaming. There was no DVD store or video store you could go to or any way to watch a movie other than going to the movie theater or seeing it on broadcast television. And we would always anticipate, usually near the holidays, movies like The Wizard of Oz, coming once a year at a certain time at night. And if you missed it, you missed it for a whole year. But great things like that, Moby Dick or A Christmas Carol, live action version of A Christmas Carol by Dickens. And so those were like just, really shows you really anticipated watching and looking forward to seeing. And the whole family would sit down and watch those things, In high school, of course, by that time, the multiplex theaters were coming in and there was a new shopping mall being put up near where we were. And I think they maybe had 6 screens. And so we would see the current movies, there. And sometimes we'd drive into Nashville downtown and see a movie or something. I used to go to, when I was a teenager, my dad would take me to Vanderbilt University every summer. They had the Sinking Creek Film Festival. It's now called the Nashville Film Festival. But I was just a film fanatic, even, from an early age, and I made films since I was age 10. And so he would drive me down, drop me off for the day, and I would meet all the filmmakers that had come to town and watch all the films all day long and get into workshops and stuff like that, making film and trying to do stuff. And so that was my early film education there at the festival.
So, did you say, "Hey, Dad, I want a camera"? Was it a Christmas present or a Hanukkah present? You just say, "Hey, I want that camera," because you started
No,
making these short
I
films.
basically stole his camera.
He took his
It's sitting.
camera.
Yeah, but he bought the little Bell and Howell Super 8 camera that fit the cartridges, and can I borrow your camera? And I just sort of never gave it back. But I became the family videographer, or it was on film. It was Super 8 film. I became the family cameraman at every event, where they wanted the birthday party or if we drove out on a summer vacation, I was always the one with the camera. And so I'm not in much of the video. I'm always behind the camera. In high school, I was recruited by the football coach to film all the games on 16 millimeter film, so that they could watch, after the game, watch the play and watch the film, as they say. They still say that to this day, even with NFL players. Well, Monday when we sit down and watch the film, we'll find out what we did wrong and how we lost the game. But that was my job, sitting on top of the press box and sometimes freezing cold weather with a hand crank. You wound it up, hand crank, Bell and Howell 16 millimeter camera filming the guys on the football field and the cheerleaders down there.
Yeah, that's amazing. And what was some of your special memory, like the little short films that you were just so proud of? Because you did a lot of really fantastic short films.
Well, I did, when I first started, I did, the first thing I did, inspired by Dickens, a roll of Super 8 film ran 3 minutes, 20 seconds. That was the duration. I think it was like 100 feet of film or whatever fit in the cartridge. Maybe it was only 50, I think 100. And so I knew that's all I had. I didn't have any way to edit. I didn't have any way to, I was just, whatever I shot in the camera had to be the movie. So we just do, sequentially, the sequential continuity, one shot after the other. I played Scrooge. I'm in the bed. My best friend's filming that shot. My brother comes in dressed as Marley's ghost, and I'm filming that shot from where I'm sitting in the bed. And, we just sort of did that. And my family was Cratchit's, Bob Cratchit's family around the dinner table, and my little brother was Tiny Tim. And we just, that's the way we did it. And, I was 10 years old when I shot that film. And then my brother, my best friend and I, we started trying to make little horror movies. But they were they weren't like slasher movies. They were like more based on things like the Universal monster movies, like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, or, some Dracula type thing, or we had one idea for a mummy type film, but we didn't end up shooting that one. But yeah, so we would make little films like that. And that was during elementary school and junior high school. And then in high school, we moved just not far away to a suburb of Nashville, and I started a new school in the 9th grade. And these upperclassmen, about 2 years older than me, or 3 years older, they approached me one day at school, like these three big guys, and they're like, "Are you the kid that makes films?" I'm like, "Yeah." And they said, "Well, we want to make a movie, but we don't know how. Can you help us make a film?" So all through high school, we made these kooky, sort of spoofs on television shows and movies and comic book characters. We had a Captain America type character he was a hopeless alcoholic who frequented, he would stop by the brothel on his way to solve a crime. It was just ridiculous sort of stuff. What 15, 16-year-old guys would do, right? Just silly.
He's too drunk to save anybody.
Yeah, so it's, just silly stuff like that. And then I made an animated film when I was 14 years old, a short animated film, my first one, with sort of cell animation, trying that out. And I was a huge fan of Saturday morning cartoons. And again, I grew up, in the 60s. That's where you saw cartoons one day a week on Saturday morning. And that's where you got all your cartoons. There were no cartoons on during the week. Was that, and then the Sunday comics and color in the newspaper were interesting. But yeah, so I got interested in a lot of just in animation in general, and cartooning. And my dad was an artist, a fine painter, fine art painter, and so he taught us a lot about, my siblings and I, a lot about painting and sculpting and that kind of stuff. He wasn't a filmmaker, but our whole family was sort of into the visual arts, I guess you could say, especially drawing and painting and cartooning.
Wow. So that's amazing. So then did you graduate, did you go to college before you moved to Los Angeles from Tennessee, or?
I went to Los Angeles to attend college, and I did it in a way that wasn't very smart at the time. I thought it was a film school. They're still there. They're out in Tarzana now. It's called Columbia College, and they teach film and television production. and it's sort of like a trade school in a way. But they, they're accredited. You can get a diploma there. But I thought, I had saved up money working a summer at the mall near the movie theater, selling shoes or something like that. Yeah, shoe salesman, a terrible shoe salesman. And but I saved up enough money over the summer to buy my airline tickets. I got accepted into the college. Had enough money to live on for maybe 6 months or so, and I thought I'd work a part-time job, and I got a job at a department store in Beverly Hills as a stock boy. But then I would have to take the bus from Beverly Hills all the way back to Hollywood to school. The school was located on La Brea Avenue in Hollywood at the time. They've since moved out to Tarzana, out to the valley. But the schedule became, eventually it didn't work. I was late to school all the time, and then I started running out of money and this and that and the other, and I ended up not being able to pay my tuition and so forth. So I finally dropped out of school very early on after not attending for too long. But I dropped out of school, and then the apartment building I was living in, about 90% of all the tenants of that building were also students at the film school. So, although I wasn't in school anymore, every film project that they worked on, I would always get invited to be on the crew in some supporting role as a grip or still photographer or just whatever they needed, loading film magazines for the camera department or whatever. So I got sort of like the full education without paying for it.
Oh, that's amazing. So you went to college. So how did you start getting into this animation field? You got into it more and more.
Well, the ability, I had the ability to draw pretty well, and I had a small portfolio of artwork, I guess you could say, some cartoon drawings, some other sketches I had done, and some more finished pieces I'd done. And I heard that Hanna-Barbera Studios, they're no longer around, but they were the studios that did the Flintstones originally and Scooby-Doo originally and all those, the Jetsons and all those films, all those animated television shows. And they were offering sort of like an internship program, but basically they were looking for young artists to fill a seat on their assembly line, of making Saturday morning cartoons. And so I took my little smattering of drawings over I made an appointment, went over and talked to the guy in charge of the thing. And he said, well, some of these drawings are pretty good, but they're not very good. And come back, do some more and come back later. And I was very discouraged. And I came back about a year later and finally was accepted into the program. And the program was a 2 nights a week and at no charge. It was like a class. They taught you the skills of being an assistant animator. So working alongside animators and cleaning up their drawings and finishing all the in-between drawings that were needed. And and then I was hired out of that class group, a few months after I had started, and I started working at Hanna-Barbera in 1979 as an assistant animator.
Oh, that's fantastic. So it's interesting, like they say, like you're not good enough, and then but you came back, and then you are good enough, and you got in, and it's amazing,
Yep.
like the journey that people go through to just get in and have their talent noticed. But like I think it was in you. You were like self-taught, right? Because you didn't go to a specific school to learn.
No, but my dad taught me a lot about art and drawing, and he was, it's funny because, and I would still say this is probably true with most high schools or most public education, I would say, but art is not taught seriously as a subject matter. Not like science is taught, not like math is taught, not like English is taught even. Art is just sort of an elective, and when I was going to high school, it's just people who wanted to get out of another class that would take art classes, right? But they had no real interest. The teachers, a couple of teachers I had in high school, were very passionate about art, and so they appreciated students like myself and my brother, my older brother, who were really into artwork and really into art and artists and knew a lot about art history and things like that. And my brother's actually taught art history at university, in the past since then. But really, it's like, and so many people I meet, constantly I meet people who have kids who are college age. And I was just talking to mom 2 days ago, and she said, my daughter wants to get into film and visual effects work, but a lot of parents are hesitant when their kids say, I want to go into art. I want to be an artist, or I want to be a filmmaker, or I want to be a singer, or whatever, or songwriter. They're not very encouraging sometimes. But my parents were totally for it. When I told them I was moving to Hollywood to try to make movies, they're like, go for it, and let us know when whatever you work on is on TV, because we want to tune in and watch it, And that's just the way they were. They were I think they were a bit naive as to what Hollywood was. I lived in a very rough part of town when I went out there. It was total culture shock coming from Tennessee to Hollywood. It was just completely like landing on a different planet for me. But I tended to survive through it, so.
Yeah. So how did you get your first big break in directing this amazing film like Mulan? Do you want to share with us?
Yeah, well, I had at Hanna-Barbera, I'd worked with an artist, a great artist, Mike Lessa, and he was also an assistant animator, and we were very good friends, and we were sort of friendly competition too, sort of who could produce because at that time, we would get bonuses if we went over our quota of work. It's like a certain number of drawings per day or something, and we weren't paid by the number of drawings, we were paid by the hour. But if we went above and beyond our quota of work that they expected us to do, they would actually pay bonus money, to us. So we were always in competition to see who could outdo the other. But he left to work for Ralph Bakshi, and he gave me a call, and these guys are over at Disney, and they're doing a film. He said, I don't know anything about it. He said, but they need a good assistant animator. And he said, I can't do it because I just signed with Bakshi. He said, but I'll recommend you for the job. And I said, well, what is it? He says, I'm not sure. He said, it's a movie called Tron. And he said, it's some sort of science fiction thing. I don't know. But he said, it's only like 6 months work. So I went over, and he said, if you want the job, he says, just call this guy. I've already recommended you, and they're desperate right now. And they were being staffed by non-Disney artists. It was just a bunch of other artists who had come in to do this live action animation hybrid. And we were starting to use things like computer graphics, which nobody had ever used in a movie before. And so it was really quite an experimental film. And so, long story short, I got hired at Disney to work for 6 months. I ended up staying for 22 years. And during that time, I continued to, my buddies and I was in the visual effect. I was in this, we call it special effects department. Don Hahn, one of the great producers in animation and live action films, but he was our department head at the time, and he hired me from a temporary position into a full-time position with Disney feature animation, and the guys in my department in the visual effects, we were all sort of like, we were just, at heart, I think we're all filmmakers, and so even on the weekends, we would try to make our own little short films and do this and do that. We just had this sort of ongoing creative spirit to want to always make film and try out new things, and do different things. So once we got some knowledge about computer graphics and so forth, the first film that I made at Disney was a short film that had a CG character, a little horse, and a hand-drawn character side by side in the same film. And it's something I wanted to do as a sort of hybrid mix. It was called Off His Rockers. And it was just an experiment that we started doing after hours. Like, we'd meet on Thursday night. I'd buy everybody a pizza. We'd do storyboarding. We'd start trying some character designs. Anybody who was interested, by that time I already moved to the studio in Florida. Their studio they had here for 15 years. And some of the uppity ups at Disney saw what we were doing, and they're like, you guys got to finish this film. So they actually paid to have it finished, and we finished it, and then it was released in front of another live action feature film. And then after that, I was offered the short film Trail Mix Up, which was a Roger Rabbit, one of the Roger Rabbit short cartoons that I directed. And then from the strength of that and the strength of the studio in Florida, which was a brand new studio, but we had a couple of years under our belt, we just kept telling the guys in Burbank, the studio heads back there, were like, we could do a feature film here. We've got what it takes. We could do a feature film. They're like, well, okay, we'll let you start developing one. So they just pulled me out and they said, Barry, start developing this. We got this story. We bought the rights to this small children's book. It's about this character, Fa Mulan, and Fa Mulan. We just call her Mulan. But and it was just a small children's book that a writer named Robert Sanssouci had written about the legend of Mulan, which was an old Chinese folk tale. And the movie that we ended up making bared not a lot of resemblance to it, but the core of the story, that this girl had disguised herself as a boy and gone off to war to save her father's life, that remained intact. So the core of the story was always there. And we just began developing it, and I worked on that film I was the first artist asked to work on the film, and I was the last person to walk out of Technicolor the day we finished the color timing 5 years later, almost to the day. So it was a 5-year journey making that movie. So, and then my co-director, Tony Bancroft, still a very good friend of mine, he came along about 2 years into the development, just before production. And he was a supervising animator on Lion King. And so he came in, and so we made the film, and very happy we did, and very pleased with the way it has been received over the years. It's just been it has become a classic of Disney animation, and it's just a film that a lot of people have on their list of their top 2 or 3 that they really love in terms of story and character.
Yeah, and Milan, I think I did my interpretation of that because it was a public domain story on Enchanting book readings, my podcast, and people loved it. Yeah, so
Yeah.
so that was your big director debut, right? For animation, that's amazing.
For a feature-length film, yeah, absolutely. And then I worked as a co-director with Aardman Animations. Sarah Smith hired me to work on a film called Arthur Christmas. And a lot of people aren't that familiar with it, but it's a great fun Christmas story. And that she and Pete Bainham wrote the screenplay. And so I worked at Aardman in Bristol, England, for about a year on that film. And then, so that was another feature film experience that I enjoyed a lot. And the animation for that was done in Culver City at Sony.
Oh, so what's a little bit like directing an animation? You're directing people at different parts of people, and like you said, is it assembly line? There's different people around the world, or how do you coordinate that as a director?
Well, a lot of live action films have a big crew nowadays. You read the credits, there's tons of people on it. Typically, animated film, like Mulan, by the time you're done, maybe 600 people have worked on it. 600 names on the credits in total. But most people are specialists. It's just like in the film industry. Some people, there's writers that come in and help, and there's comedy writers that come in and help. There's lyricists that write the lyrics for songs. There's composers that write the music for the songs and work with the lyricist. And then there's storyboard artists, and you work with them all through there. So, but I tell a lot of people, an animation director film is no different than a live action director. You're deciding who's going to be cast in the part, right? Voice wise. Now with animation, you have to deal with 2 actors. One is the voice talent, like Ming-Na Wen or Eddie Murphy in Mulan, for example. But the other artist is the animator who's playing that part visually. And we really consider them actors, and we really consider them performers, because they are delivering the visual performance of the character on screen. So you have sort of double the actors to work with for speaking roles than you would in live action. But every other decision, what's the location look like, the environment, what's the costume look like, what's the hair look like, what's this? If you were casting live action, you would just say this actor or this actor with this makeup is going to look like this. So all the same decision. Where's the lights? Where's the camera? Where do I cut? where do I score the music? All those things are in common with. There's no difference in those type of films, other than I think sometimes maybe animation gets even a little more tedious because it takes so long to do, especially hand drawn, but computer animation too. I mean, it takes years to make a feature animated film, and it takes years to make a lot of live action films too. I don't want to take anything away from that because it's a huge, long process filmmaking. But but it's really the same decisions. You're making aesthetic decisions. You're making creative decisions. You're sort of projecting your vision for the story and communicating that vision to the rest of your crew. And no matter what phase of the production you're in, whether you're dealing with the visual effects artists, or whether you're dealing with character animators, or whether you're talking to the this composer like a guy like Jerry Goldsmith who did the final score for that, whether you're creatively discussing a scene with him, you're still sort of sharing. Here's what I think this should be, and here's what I think how this should go, and here's what I want the audience to feel at this moment in the story. So that's key, and that's really what a director's job is interpreting sometimes a written screenplay into a visual, something people can watch. But oftentimes in animation, we start even or have Disney's typical tradition is start with a basic story, a few characters, and just start drawing stuff and coming up with ideas for moments, coming up for ideas for scenes, coming up with, and it's really writing. And the story artists are as much, I give them as much credit as I do the writers who sit down with a keyboard. They're equally creating story content. So yeah, it's a big, directing a feature film is a huge job, and it's just all encompassing, and you don't have really time to think about much else in your day.
Oh, that's amazing. So I'm gonna invite everybody to come back for part 2 with Barry Cook, animation director for Mulan. We have so much more to talk about. We gotta get into Arthur Christmas and all of your amazing films that are coming back. So everyone come back for part 2. Thank you for listening. We'll be right back.